Hey, what's going on, everybody? A week ago, Capcom reached out and offered the Jai podcast early access to Dragon's Dogma 2, which we were already excited to play, and well, I got my hands on it and put about 20 hours into it. And today I just wanted to do a first impressions on the game. The reason why this is not a full review is simply because this game is massive, and honestly, I was sick last week, so it was actually a challenge for me to get as far as I wanted to within this game, so sorry, but I will do a review for this game once I fully finish it. Let's first go to the story. So Dragon's Dogma 2 happens in a parallel world to the previous game, and it follows the story of the Arisen, which is who you are. The Arisen is a hero who's been marked by a dragon and is now obligated to defeat that said dragon, and doing so, this will allow you as the Arisen to reclaim the heart that the dragon has stolen from you. I would describe the story kind of also having a subplot of political intrigue. Kind of gives me a little Game of Thrones vibe, but I want to stress when I do say that, I'm not trying to say that this game has the in-depth storytelling of Game of Thrones, and as a matter of fact, I wouldn't say that really you should be going into Dragon's Dogma 2 with a strong story focus at the forefront of the game. You'll be able to get from point A to point B, and you'll still be able to keep up with what's going on, but really, it isn't really one of those games where you have to lock in and pay attention to every single cutscene. Moving into the character creator, I have to say that this is one of the coolest character creators that I have seen in a RPG in quite a while. It's very in-depth, and yes, there is the Killmonger haircut in case you're wondering. But outside of that, you can give your character a BBL, because I know that's what everyone's gonna be asking me. Yes, you can do all this, and on top of that, you can also decide on customizing your pawn. Now, you only get one pawn and one character that you can import from the character creator, so just keep that in mind if you created a bunch of them. Make sure that you auto-select which ones you want to be imported, because the game will be able to import that, and I think you need to make sure that the character creator is still installed on your machine, so don't uninstall it yet, just keep it installed on your machine until after you finish importing, then you can uninstall it. After you finish creating your character, you're dropped into a intro sequence that gives you just the bare bones of just how the combat is supposed to work, and you're a slave and you're escaping slavery into a different country. That's the gist of it. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty abrupt and just gets to the point. Doesn't really explain a lot, and there's like a floaty ghost kind of like Jedi that's like telling you what to do. So you might be a little bit kind of thrown off by how this game starts. I'm not gonna lie, it starts pretty abrupt, and you might think that it seems a little bit weird, but I think that's some of the charm that I think relays over to Dragon's Dogma 1 into this game. I'm gonna repeat this a couple of times, and I'm gonna keep stressing it quite a bit. This game truly does feel like it is more of Dragon's Dogma 1 and not necessarily Dragon's Dogma 1 in name, but really feels like a different type of modern game. It really just feels like Dragon's Dogma 1 was in a time machine, most of the time for the better and a little bit of the time for the worse. Once you end up in this brand new country, you enter into the open world, and after a brief little dialogue and simple little quest system that you'll be running through, and you can decide on where you want to go from there. Now, this open world, I'll have to say, is actually pretty good. I feel like there's been a lot of care done to this open world, and it feels very dynamic and alive. And I know everybody says that, oh, the world feels alive, but I truly believe that this game does a really good job of it. Not only does it have NPCs that walk around the paths, and there's characters with different schedules, it's almost kind of GTA light, in that there's a lot of NPCs and they all have their own names and they actually have purpose. This game has something really cool, which is an actual like permadeath system with each of the NPCs, which is when one dies, whether it's from an NPC or you, and they can't get revived, they actually die permanently. The reason why I feel like this world is so alive is because of how it handles the passage of time. There's this really cool system where whether it's the items that you hold in your inventory or certain time-based quests, or you just traversing the world and seeing how you influence it and impact it, and even to the quest of having a certain amount of time that you have to do a quest, and if you take too long, the quest will auto-resolve or will start to have actual choices resolved based off of you either completing it in time or showing up way too late. It reminds me so much of like just the emergent gameplay that you saw in Breath of the Wild. Everything from like when you set something on fire, it sets everything else out. It really wants you to experiment, and it's very reactive to how you move throughout the world, whether it's like the ragdoll physics or whether it's how you move throughout the world or certain NPCs falling, tripping over themselves. Like, it really feels alive that the world interacts with you, about how some of the background systems actually interact with the environment and with the combat system as well. Speaking of that, before we get into the combat, I will discuss a little bit about the RPG system and specifically the class system. So there's a class system called Vocations, and this is effectively the classes that you can play as. Starting off, you get to play either as an archer, a mage, a fighter, or a thief. Keep in mind that these 4 are what you get to play as off rip. All the other vocations that you've seen probably maybe in your marketing, such as the warrior, the mystic spearhand, the magic archer, trickster, sorcerer, and the wayfarer, and the warfare. These classes actually don't unlock right away, and they take quite some time. This is me speaking from 20 hours in. I haven't even unlocked all the vocations, and you have to find them at certain locations at certain points. Now, it seems like if you just follow the main quest, most of them are going to unlock as you just do more of the main quests. But if you were excited to play the Mystic Spearhand, let me just temper your expectations. Now, you will not see this class until you put in as much time as I did. But the other ones, the Mystic Spearhand, the Magic Archer, the Trickster, and the Warfare, those are what you get later on in the game. And as a matter of fact, I still haven't found the Magic Archer, and I have not found the Warfare, but I did find the Trickster, and I did find Mystic Spearhand. I will not tell you where to find them because I want them to be more of a surprise. It feels like this game has that sort of, and I say this very carefully, the same way that Elden Ring did have, with the idea of mystery, and that everywhere that you go, when you're exploring, the game truly wants you to explore it, and that's how you actually unlock some of the subclasses, is by exploring, and how you'll find some items and some cool little tidbits as well. The RPG system is not as in-depth as I think some people may be thinking, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. While you will see a stat sheet, it's not like a Dark Souls game where you'll be able to individualize every time you upgrade, like points that you put into specific stats. Most of it's just universally being added based off of the vocation that you actively are. Now, if you're wondering, well, if I'm one vocation for a good chunk of the game and I switch over to the other one, doesn't this screw up my stat list? The way that they've done it effectively is there's like a baseline stats that you get as you level up, and then there's a bonus amount of like experience or stat points that you get that just get auto added to the stats that matter the most to your class. And the system decides this, not you. So you don't get the choice of your own. You don't really get to experiment as much as you would in something like Elden Ring. But when you do swap over to, let's say, a different class, so for example, like if I was going from warrior to a trickster, you can see that the bonus, so all the bonus points that were really put into warrior get auto switched over to more of your magic stuff. That's so that you don't pretty much feel screwed if you decide on trying to switch. So the game does want you to try to mix it up and try the other classes. I went straight from fighter to warrior and I never looked back. I really wanted to play like Guts from Berserk, and I lived a Guts fantasy. And that's the thing that I really like about this, is that if you're a fan of anime or over-the-top type of action, you'll love the combat system here. If I could describe it, everything feels like something just ripped straight out of like an anime. If you're a fan of Berserk, if you're a fan of like any of those like isekais in a fantasy universe or something like that, Sword Art Online type thing, like if you like that type of stuff, then I feel like you'll really like the combat system here. If you are a gamer who is gameplay first, the combat system is where you are going to love the game. And that's where I think that gamers who care most about the gameplay and the combat, that is effectively the best absolute part of the game that I would highly recommend that I know for a fact you'll end up really loving. So one thing just to keep in mind is that the combat is an acquired taste. It looks really cool, but how it actually plays out, it actually requires quite a bit of dexterity and skill. There is no auto-locking in this game. There's no targeting system in this game. So you cannot have your camera autofocus on an enemy. And this can be a little bit frustrating early on because you might be used to that in other games, but that's not the case here. You have to actually aim where your sword is going to go based off of where you're aiming your left thumbstick. So just keep those things in mind, but that's really where the combat really shines. It's dynamic, it's alive, and it's unique. I would say that it is somewhat similar to what you'd expect from any sort of action RPG. I know some people try to make a comparison to like Dark Souls and stuff like that. I wouldn't say it feels like that. It feels like its own thing. The closest comparison I could give you is maybe a little bit like Monster Hunter and the idea of fighting these big bosses, but it's just this unique aspect of being able to target specific body parts, climbing bigger opponents, or trying to hit their weak points, or trying to evade them from attacking is really awesome. The other thing that I think that will turn some people off to this game's combat system is the lack of a dodge. There is no natural dodge roll that all the characters get access to. As a matter of fact, some classes don't even have that capability as any sort of dash or dodge ability at all. So really the game is more movement and offensive based and doesn't really give you that many defensive options. Now some classes I found, like Thief, has a dash, so you can use that to get away because you're kind of a glass cannon where you can hit fast and you run really fast and you dodge attacks and you keep slapping people. The other thing with a fighter is if you're playing fighter, which is the shield, you have a parry that you can use with the shield, so you can actually deflect. It's literally a deflect. I would say it's very similar to Sekiro's deflect. Or if you are the class I was, a warrior, later on as I unlocked more skills, there was a skill that you could use to hold a counter attack pose where you could parry someone who tries to hit you and then counter attack them, punishing them for swinging on you while you hit this pose. So there are certain classes that do have some defensive capabilities, but they might not feel as good as you would prefer to, or that you felt in other games. So I think that's kind of important just to point out. Once you get used to the combat engine, and I'm not saying to say that like the combat's not good, it's like something that you have to just get used to. It's really fun. It's different. It's a little bit, I wouldn't say even janky, it's just a little bit special. That's the best way I can describe it. It's a little bit special. And this special feeling about the combat can be a little bit off-putting, I think, for people that are going into it with a certain expectation and then realizing, oh my God, this is not what I was expecting. Overall though, the best part about this game is once you start to master that combat and you take down these big foes, it feels very rewarding, and I absolutely love that. And speaking of that, you won't be doing this on your own. That goes into my other big point, which is the pawn system. This is another really unique aspect of the game that I really love. The pawn system is effectively 3 NPCs that join you on your journey no matter what. One of them is one that you build for yourself. That's your main pawn. He or she will just be with you the entirety of the game. So no matter what you do, this pawn is your own custom creation. What I did was I customized mine to be PANAM from Cyberpunk because I love her. And I just like how she is in Cyberpunk with a sniper, I made her an archer as well. You actually design their characteristics, their personality, and their personality informs on their fighting style, and then you can pick their vocation as well, like I said. You also can hire 2 other pawns from a list of other players. So as other players are playing the game, you can go to these cool locations, these rock locations that are spread throughout the world and in certain cities, and then you can actually hire other pawns from different classes, and they're all the different classes in the game to help you out. And as these pawns enter into your game, they'll basically tell you what they're good at. So they might have a certain specialization that allows them to maybe help you like haggle certain shopkeepers, or they might be able to combine objects for you automatically. And they'll have combat styles as well. Some might be upfront and say, hey, I'll be the vanguard for your group, I'll attack. Hey, I'll be by your side and protect you. Hey, I'll be hanging back and playing defensive. Or hey, I'll heal you if in the case that you need healing. What I would highly recommend is that you diversify your group and always have a healer. No matter what, always have a healer for yourself in this game. I think it's so important overall, especially because sometimes this game can be brutal. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head if there was a difficulty option. I don't think there was. I think it's just one difficulty throughout the entirety of the game. And I'm not saying that this is like a game that is Dark Souls levels of difficulty, but sometimes there are things in this game that can just murder you. And because the game, while there is like a leveling system, there is no sort of indicator of, oh, this is what this enemy's level is. Like, you don't see any levels of any enemies. You kind of have to just guess what looks threatening enough to you, and as you engage it, if the fight seems too difficult for you, the game actually tells you that at some points it's okay to just retreat and give up on that fight and then come back later. The quests are pretty straightforward. There's nothing here that I really thought was a little bit insane. When you do have certain pawns that you hire from other players, let's say that player is further ahead in the story than you or has discovered a region that you haven't discovered yet, that pawn will actually retain the knowledge that they had while playing the game either with their master or with another player, and will actually inform you of those certain locations as you are near them. So if ever you're just mindlessly exploring and you're kind of like, I don't know where to go, or you're trying to find like where to go for a certain quest, if your pawn that you've hired has already done that quest or has seen that quest, it can actually offer its advice or say, hey, I know where that is. Would you like me to guide you? And it can take the lead and you could just follow them to the actual position, to the actual place that you need to go. They're also very good at discovering treasure chests and telling you about some of the cool treasures that are hiding in the area, and even caves that have cool loot in them. It's really awesome to see this because it's all dynamically happening. This isn't scripted stuff. If certain NPCs that you have don't have knowledge of this area, they'll be as confused and blind as you. So it's really cool to find certain pawns that have quest knowledge. It can really help you out if you're trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B. But really, it's not just about getting to point B and just doing the quest, but it's the in-between point A and point B that's really where this game shines. This game is built off of a load of emergent and dynamic systems that are all unscripted. There are so many things that can just happen to you while trying to get to a quest that really, it feels like a story within itself. It creates those same type of awesome stories that you remember telling your friends as you discovered cool things in Elden Ring. Those type of experiences and stories exist here in this game, and I really love it for that. And then finally, one of the last big points is performance. I played this on PC. I have a i9 something, I can't remember, and I also have a 3080 as my graphics card. At the time that I did play this, there were no graphical drivers available, and I had an older driver anyway that I was running off of. And so since I had NVIDIA, they did have quite the slew of video options that you can do to customize your own experience. So that was nice to see, including DLSS, and I think I saw FSR as well. Also, side note, because me personally, I care about this thing, if you have an ultra wide or super ultra wide like myself, you can enjoy this game just naturally without any need of editing any files or nothing. The game just works with super ultra wide and it looks phenomenal. Mwah. The other side of things when it comes to performance, I'm not gonna say it's bad, I think it's solid. I think that in some areas it could be a little bit better, but overall it's still totally playable. I don't think that it was consistently 60 FPS though, but for the most part, I do think that the game ran perfectly fine, especially when you're out in the wilderness and just doing certain quests. But the specific areas where it's very noticeable of the actual performance problems is in the main cities, specifically one of the big towns that you can walk through just naturally feels like I'm hitting under 30 FPS. It's not a slideshow, it's still totally doable, but there's definitely areas of the map where I'm just like, oh God, like that felt really noticeable. But while you're out and during actual combat, the game runs really smooth. And at sometimes it feels 60 FPS and other times it doesn't. But again, I was playing this game at one of the more higher settings, so I feel like if I had taken the time to actually mess with the settings a little bit more, I probably could have got more consistent 60 FPS to be perfectly honest. The other thing just to keep in mind on top of that is I did notice some pop-in and it was very noticeable. There's quite a bit of NPC pop-in when it comes to you walking around in the city where you'll just run into an NPC that you didn't even see because they just didn't load in. They'll just magically pop right in front of you. I don't think that this was necessarily game breaking, but it is quite noticeable quite a bit as you play the game. Overall though, I'm just gonna give you my pros and cons. Pros, I'll say so far, we're 20 hours into the game. I think that this game's combat system is phenomenal. It's really the reason you want to play this game, is it's for the combat. And also, I really like the pawn system as well. It's really unique and cool. The dialogue they have, the camaraderie, just the way that they interact with not only the world, but you, and the way that they withhold knowledge and they can gather items and do things to help you, and they synergize in battle, and they just know what to do, and they're smart. It's really good. Yes, this is a system that was based off of Dragon Dogmas 1, but it feels like with the added development time of the sequel and just technology just evolving, they feel more alive than ever before. And the character customization, I gotta say, big pro as well. I love the character customization, even with the Killmonger. It gives you so much flexibility that you don't see that much with a lot of RPGs. Gotta give them props for that. Really awesome job. And I'll say the world is really cool. I think at first it feels a little generic, but as you discover more mysteries and you take the time to actually explore the world, you will be rewarded. So I say go off of the main path and just explore some stuff, look around, discover things, go if you see something interesting, check it out, and I promise you, sometimes the game doesn't reward you as much as I feel like it should. As a matter of fact, the pawns even make a note of this and crack a joke about that, which I think is kind of sick.
This is what we went to all that trouble for?
Rarely have I felt so empty.
But on the other side, there are times where you can find some really awesome things. The only cons that I really have for this game is I think that the stamina system is annoying, not during combat, but when you're outside of combat. Yes, you actually will lose stamina as you sprint outside of combat, and I find that very annoying during the open world. Another thing that I find kind of annoying about this game is the fast travel, or the obtuse way it's done. Now, I know the producer came out and said originally that like he wasn't a fan of fast travel and you didn't really need it, but fast travel is in Dragon's Dogma 2, but it's very similar, I think almost the same system as the first game, and it's very annoying. In order for you to fast travel, you have to get this certain item for you to do it. I think it's like called like a port key or something like that. And then once you have the port key, you also need to have certain designated rocks that you can find. Some of them are already in the world, and other ones you have to actually get your hands on and physically plant where you want them to be. So you can kind of create your own fast travel system of certain areas you want to keep returning to, but those items are kind of rare to find in the world. They had me going back and forth to the same area at least 2 to 3 times in a row, and I honestly found that pretty irritating. But other than that though, these are kind of a little bit just more of annoyances. Nothing of these cons that I bring up are really deal breakers for me. They're just little annoyances overall. But in my personal opinion, I feel like the pros definitely outweigh the cons. So would I recommend this game? Simply put, if you were a fan of Dragon's Dogma 2, easily day one cop, without a doubt. This game feels like more of Dragon's Dogma 1, the best parts of it, with a little bit of that special weirdness that the first game had, with some obvious improvements and some things that are just a little bit meh. But if you never played Dragon's Dogma 1, but you looked at the gameplay and you said, that looks really cool, I would still recommend this game to you, even if you have no knowledge of the first game, just because I feel like the gameplay is amazing. Again, I cannot stress this enough. If you are a gameplay first focused gamer, this game is a game I feel like you'll end up really loving. However, if you're more into very in-depth RPG mechanics, honestly, if you're expecting this game to be exactly like Elden Ring or a Dark Souls game, you might end up being a little bit disappointed, in which I would say I would not recommend this game for you off rip, and instead watch some more reviews and get a better informed opinion on if you think you'll really end up liking this game, or just wait for it to go on sale. It's no rush. There's so many games coming out right now. Trust me, you're in no rush to just immediately go play this game or any other game that's coming out or has been out. So overall, yeah, those are my first impressions of Dragon's Dogma 2. As I said before, when I finish the game, I will do a more full-on analysis and review of this entire game, but I hope that this long-form first impression of Dragon's Dogma 2 did inform you enough to decide on if you wanted to pick this game up or not. Oh, and by the way, feel free to use PANAM. Somewhere on the screen, I'll post her ID. Feel free to hire her and use her. I've shown her a lot of things in the game, so she'll be very good to be able to help you guide yourself through the first couple of hours of this game. All right, Arisen, good luck.